even if you match your opponent's Tailwind, who's going first, right? So really excited to see really how these Pokemon are trained and what really ends up outspeeding what. I'd love to see the Hawlucha come out here, but does have to worry a little bit about the Psychic type Pokemon as well as that toxicity.
Well, let's get it started, shall we? Let's get into the second match of the day and see exactly what these players have opted to go for their strategies. And Giacomo going to be bringing out that male Indeedee with the Whimsicott, and this looks very familiar, doesn't it? This Lapras and Whimsicott coming out from Miguel.
Yeah, so no surprise to see Whimsicott led on both ends. You kind of just want to put on the pressure immediately with Tailwind. So yeah, the Indeedee male coming out, often used over Indeedee female for, its faster speed stat. It also has access to Imprison, so you can imprison opposing Trick Room Pokemon and imprison expanding Force users. So, right now, Miguel can either change the terrain with the Max Lightning or just go for that G-Max Resonance, get those screens up immediately, stick on the field for quite a while. I think what's always interesting about both players having Whimsicott as well is, do you actually click Tailwind on the first turn? Because something that it's often smart to do is, if you don't feel like you need the speed advantage immediately, let your opponent set up Tailwind and then set up Tailwind in the subsequent turn so you basically get an extra turn of Tailwind. That's always something to potentially consider on both ends. One really crazy play that Giacomo could make right now is potentially even going for a Trick Room if he has it on the Indeedee male, if you're expecting Tailwind to come out from Miguel's end.
Ooh, yeah, that would be really spicy if we got a chance to see that, but we're at least going to see that Gigantamax come through quick and early, as we got a chance to see Miguel selecting what they were going to do for this first turn. And that really kind of begs the question about how Giacomo's going to really answer this. Well, it is going to be a Tailwind to be able to match that of Miguel's. And now it's up to whether or not this Indeedee is going to do... Looks like Expanding Force. Oh my gosh, Whimsicott does not take that well.
No, it survives, but it actually has the eject button. So you often see Focus Sash on Whimsicott. Instead, it's the eject button there, and is able to at least hang on. So it does give Miguel a free switch and now into the Rillaboom. So able to change the terrain, now pressure either Pokemon with something like a Fake Out as well. But yeah, eject button doesn't work nearly as well in this matchup because you have to deal with the the Psychic terrain from the opposing side. This is going to be a big G-Max Resonance here as well. And yeah, that's able to set up the screens now. You get Rillaboom in for free. You still have a bunch of turns with Gigantamax on Lapras' end. So a big question is, who does Giacomo Dynamax in this game? I'm thinking it's going to be that Cinderace. And yeah, Whimsicott on the opposing end actually just goes down as well as Life Orb Lapras, something that we saw was kind of a staple in the Invitational, able to just pick up a KO onto it. So yeah, I think Miguel definitely has a lot of early game pressure. I think the Cinderace is probably the best switch in you can have right now on Giacomo's end, because you could go for something like, a Max Knuckle onto Lapras. Won't be enough to pick up the knockout, but 2 Max Knuckles potentially will be able to. Rillaboom doesn't put on that much pressure right now. However, one thing that is in favor on, Miguel's end is that he has that Rillaboom out, and it's able to put on a lot of pressure offensively against the Indeedee right now. So I think, on Giacomo's end, you could go for something like maybe just like a Follow Me and then Max Airstream or Max Flare to try to just KO the Rillaboom. But if you Max Flare, you have to worry about a potential, Fake Out into Indeedee and then Max Geyser into the Cinderace. So a lot of possibilities to consider right now on both ends. I think Cinderace, pretty good answer against the Lapras, so.
Yeah, well, it is going to be a switch out here. So Alakazam coming in for Giacomo, and I don't know if this is going to get punished, as Cinderace is going to go for the Dynamax here. I think
right,
with the... I wonder if the Cinderace is going to go for some kind of speed control, but it's actually Gigantamax Cinderace coming through.
Yeah, one of the new tools coming out with the DLC, able to do, increase damage, and with its, signature G-Max attack instead of setting up the Sun. So looks like it's actually going to be a Max Knuckle going into a Lapras. So yeah, able to get that attack boost, but now you're at risk of, 2 big attacks coming out from Miguel's end. You also are fighting type now, so, you're not resistant to, say, grass type attacks coming out from the Rillaboom. Rillaboom did opt for a U-turn, it looks like, into Alakazam. That's enough to pick up a one-hit KO.
Oh my goodness. That Alakazam came in, and unfortunately, it's not going to do much this game, but Rillaboom also going to be able to get back into its Pokeball, and Miguel gets to bring out something else, which is going to be that Hawlucha for the rest of this game. So really interesting that we get a chance to actually see that Hawlucha after it also is going to get the boost from this grassy seed, as now Lapras fires back, and Cinderace unfortunately not going to be able to... It will be able to hang on, but it still does a decent amount of damage coming in from the Max Geyser.
Yeah, I think Miguel's target selection and Pokemon choices were really smart in this game. I love the Hawlucha bring here with Rillaboom, because if you're able to set up Tailwind and Hawlucha gets that Grassy Seed activated, then it basically just outspeeds everything on Giacomo's end, even if he sets up Tailwind. So basically, this was Miguel's answer of saying, okay, even if you're able to outpace me with your faster Pokemon like the Dracovish potentially, or the Cinderace, which we see out on the field, if I bring the Hawlucha, I set up Tailwind and get Terrain going, I'll still be able to outspeed with my own Hawlucha, and this puts on a lot of offensive pressure now. Of course, Miguel still has all four of his Pokemon. He's able to still control the terrain as well with that Rillaboom in the back, and still has screens up, so a lot of things going in his favor right now. I would say, yeah, Hawlucha itself is already putting on a lot of offensive pressure, and with NDD Mail being on the field, you can't even go for a Follow Me, so yeah, Simple Acrobatics should be able to just pick up the KO onto that slot, and really dominate performance here in Miguel's end.
Yeah, absolutely. All that's left for Giacomo right now is going to be that Indeedee, and I think after this final attack, even though the Expanding Force does come out, but Hawlucha stings on. So Lapras able to fire off that Max Geyser once again. And that is going to be it for this game one. Miguel taking a dominant victory over Giacomo for this very first game.
Yeah, dominating victory indeed, and I think it all really started with the Pokemon selection. I feel like Miguel brought the perfect 4 Pokemon into this matchup, got a great lead. Lapras getting
coming through, or Gigantamax if it does have that Gigantamax factor, and I think that's definitely an option that Giacomo could really use in this next game to just kind of change the pace a little bit, maybe get those paralyzes, but let's go ahead and get right into the game and see exactly what's going to happen for this game 2 between Miguel and Giacomo.
All right, let's see.
All right.
It's Toxtricity. Here we go. Very exciting.
It is Toxtricity and Whimsicott, and again, Whimsicott and Lapras coming out from Miguel.
Yeah, so I think Toxtricity definitely a good adjustment here. We were just talking about it going into this game, so I like to see that. Toxtricity is always a scary Pokemon to play against because of its G-Max move, right? It's you're kind of rolling the dice on what you're going to be able to get in terms of the status condition. So once again, the classic Whimsicott wars here. Have to think potentially, do you stagger your Tailwinds? Do you just go for Tailwind immediately? We saw the eject button on Miguel's end the last time, so I think one thing that Giacomo has to be really respectful of is the potential trick onto Toxtricity turn 1, because if you take away its item and give it the eject button and Toxtricity Dynamaxes, well, the next turn then you can maybe just, force it out with something like a Moonblast. So let's see. I like the Toxtricity adjustment, but this is why playing against eject button Whimsicott can, be really, really tricky, even if you know what's coming your way.
Yeah, well, here is that Toxtricity. Oh, I'm so excited to see this Pokemon in action. I think it's really fun, and I can't wait to see what Giacomo's actually going to do for this next turn. But Lapras goes for the Protect. Miguel's just really playing this one safe, and maybe anticipating that Giacomo's really going to try to go for max offense here with the Tailwind coming through from the Whimsicott as well. So... Oh, but the escape... Yeah, it's going to get the eject button, but Toxtricity gets a huge attack off before it potentially gets ejected from that side of the field.
Yeah, that's a ton of damage off. So, Miguel playing a little bit passively turn 1, what this allows him to do is now, set up Tailwind, stagger it by 1 turn, and as you can tell, he's actually adjusted a little bit, has that Tyranitar in the back, potentially expecting the Toxtricity in this matchup. So, yeah, now you can just go for a Tailwind of your own, or you could maybe just launch a Moonblast onto the Toxtricity, especially because, as you saw, the Whimsicott actually stole the Focus Sash away. However, you'd have to respect a potential double up onto the Whimsicott slot right now, so Tailwind is always a really safe play, especially because Miguel has staggered it by 1 turn. Lapras is obviously at risk of eating up a Max Lightning, especially with terrain being up, so I think one play Giacomo might want to consider is doubling up onto the Whimsicott slot with like a Max Use Moonblast, because the Lapras isn't really pressuring you with much damage anyway, but looks like he actually wants to push the tempo a little bit more in his favor offensively, realizes Whimsicott's not going to do too much, and Cinderace, great Pokemon to have out because it outspeeds pretty much everything on Miguel's end, and it actually will cover the Tyranitar very, very nicely here as well.
Absolutely. Miguel able to switch out their Pokemon just like Giacomo did to bring out that Cinderace. But we will see the Tailwind come through as we saw Miguel select, but now it's kind of up to what this Toxtricity is going to do as it goes for another Max Lightning. And wow, Tyranitar actually takes a decent chunk of damage from that.
Yeah, it takes a ton of damage, and Toxtricity is still out on the field for another turn, right? And as you see, the Cinderace is also faster than the Whimsicott, so despite tricking the eject button earlier on, it's actually kind of difficult to, force the Toxtricity to go out right now. I think one safe play you can make on Giacomo's end is just go for another Max Lightning onto the Toxtricity, and then go for a Fire-type attack onto the Whimsicott, pick up a KO onto there. What Miguel's trying to do, basically, as you can see, is stall out the Dynamax on Giacomo's end, and then have a late-game Dynamax. However, he did take a lot of damage with that Tyranitar. I thought Tyranitar was the Pokemon that he might even want to consider maxing. That being said, Giacomo made a really nice switch into a Cinderace. I think that was a super, super smart play. So, now I think Miguel just wants to stall out this last turn of Max. As you see, both of his Pokemon have Protect. The Max option on Tyranitar here is actually really interesting because you're basically hard calling out the Cinderace, not targeting out the Tyranitar. What this allows you to do is also survive that Max Lightning coming out from the Toxtricity. And if you're able to knock out the Cinderace, that's actually probably the biggest threat to Tyranitar from the opposing side. So I like this play from Miguel. He realizes, hey, what do I actually really want to Dynamax in the game? Probably not Lapras. That loses really hard. It's not going to be Whimsicott. And Rillaboom doesn't feel that great against Toxtricity or Cinderace. So despite Tyranitar taking 50% of damage, this is basically saying, okay, if I knock out the Cinderace, Tyranitar has such a good time.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good play coming out from Miguel as, Cinderace is going to... Whimsicott with a nice Protect read there for Miguel, just being able to take that damage away from Cinderace. And Tyranitar, now that it is maxed, will be able to take that Max Lightning. And yeah, Cinderace... actually will be able to go down to the Sandstorm damage. But, so close to hanging on.
Yeah, and I think that was a really nice play on Miguel's end, because I think often from Giacomo's position, you're expecting the Tyranitar to just go for a Protect. You obviously don't want to whiff a high jump kick into that slot. Cinderace actually is able to hang on though, but I think what's tricky here is that, Max has already ended, plus there's that extra turn of Tailwind right now from Miguel's end. So yeah, I think, the Tyranitar Max, really smart. Cinderace, will go down after one more turn, obviously. Tyranitar actually has to go for the Max Guard here, recognizing, okay, Cinderace is going to faint anyway. And, targets Tyranitar there instead of the Whimsicott.
Wow, that was a really, really nice play from Miguel, just to be able to mitigate some of that damage coming through. And now it's time for Toxtricity to go away with that eject button. And that actually puts Miguel in, I feel like, a really good spot, knowing that Toxtricity is not going to be able to attack this turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Whimsicott is going to come out, so, more potential late-game Tailwind wars as the Tailwind on the opposing end, I believe, ends now. So, yeah, the Cinderace also with the, safety goggles is just super interesting. I don't think you really see that very often. And, used to counter potentially like a Moongus or Venusaurus, especially if they have something like a Focus Sash. So, yeah, this has definitely been one super, super interesting game, especially because the Cinderace is still putting on so much offensive pressure. Miguel wasn't able to actually secure the knockout onto that slot. Still has one more turn of Dynamax, though. And, of course, you have to worry about the Toxtricity in the back because it still matches up pretty nicely into both the Rillaboom and the Lapras. So a lot of things happening right now as, we'll potentially see even more Tailwinds coming up as, Giacomo just goes for yet another Tailwind. And this time around, he staggered it in his favor. So if Whimsicott goes down here, it's going to be really tricky. As it's actually Iron Head, so it wasn't Goggles coming out from the Cinderace. It would change the Steel type, which is why it wasn't affected by Sandstorm, which was really smart.
Yeah, super smart. Is going to take that little bit of recoil damage, though, as now the Max Rockfall comes through from Miguel's Tyranitar, and Whimsicott barely hanging on, and also gets out of here with that eject button.
Yeah, it's just a rotating field of Pokemon right now. Both players switching out and back in, staggering out Tailwinds. The Cinderace hanging on a little bit from the changing into Steel type here. So Ah, man, this is super crazy as I think Miguel's Tailwind now ends, but of course he could potentially go for another Tailwind of his own. Actually, sorry, he can't. Whimsicott just fainted, so Dynamax ends now. You get Rillaboom in, and that pressures with Fake Out. So, like, while Toxtricity is pretty scary to go up against, Assault Vest Rillaboom, I think a really solid Pokemon to bring in right now because you could just go for something like Fake Out onto the Toxtricity, maybe something like a Rock Slide. But what's tricky here is that, you know, can the Whimsicott actually just KO Tyranitar with something like a Moonblast at this point? If so, you know, you might want to force the Fake Out onto the Whimsicott, but Toxtricity, I mean, Tyranitar is really low, so it should actually just feign from an attack from, I think, Whimsicott or Toxtricity, which makes this pretty tricky. So you could go for, you know, Fake Out, you could go for Grassy Glide, although I don't think Grassy Glide is scaling the Toxtricity here anyway, so maybe just opt for Fake Out onto Toxtricity, know that Whimsicott, at best can go for a Moonblast onto the Tyranitar. You get a free switch into Lapras, and this Toxtricity I think is just really good against everything Miguel brought, and because the Cinderace was able to change into Steel typing, stick around on the field for a little bit longer, yeah, just nice execution there on Giacomo's end, and yeah, hanging on from the Max Darkness with just a sliver of HP was also very, very clutch.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good things going in Giacomo's favor for sure. Oh, but taking a little while to actually make this decision here is Whimsicott's not going to go for an attack, but actually going to switch out in favor of this Indeedee. Maybe threatened by the fact that Rillaboom could go for a Grassy Glide here, but yeah. Gonna go for the
really
Sludge Bomb and yeah, talk us through that.
Yeah, it blocked the Fake Out, as you saw, which was coming out, as well as the potential Grassy Glide. So, you know, really nice way to deny damage. But by not targeting the Tyranitar there, Tyranitar actually gets a huge Rock Slide off. So I think maybe predicting Tyranitar to protect or switch out there. Instead, Tyranitar just is able to get a ton of damage off across the board. So I really like the Indeedee switch in. I think, you know, Toxtricity wasn't at much threat from being KO'd by either Rillaboom or the Lapras. You know, I guess you have to worry about a potential... Actually, I don't even think, yeah, the Rillaboom had a ability to, you know, or a move to really get the one-hit KO onto Toxtricity, so I think just reading into a Protect from Tyranitar and instead able to pick up that knockout. Now what you can do is switch the Rillaboom out back in, potentially, to change the terrain. That's certainly one play you can make. You could also switch out the Tyranitar, you know, which allows you to reset the weather, get the sand up. I'm not sure Indeedee even has a way to hit the Tyranitar, so yeah, Miguel might be content just switching Tyranitar, switch it back in, protect, let Whimsicott feign from sand, and then just close out the game with something like a crunch onto the Indeedee on the opposing end.
Looks like Miguel has found the win condition that they're hoping for as Whimsicott goes for the Moonblast, maybe hoping to pick up the knockout onto the Tyranitar, but it is going to be Lapras in its stead as here comes that expanding force that we got a chance to see. Does get the double knockout here, but Tyranitar able to come back in, and that's kind of the setup that Miguel was looking for.
Yeah, exactly. I think the big question I have here basically is, does the Indeedee actually have any attack that can hit this Tyranitar and pick up the KO? You know, it does get access to, say, something like Dazzling Gleam. Dazzling Gleam, I think, would probably allow it to pick up the KO, but I'm not sure it has it here. Most Indeedees run Expanding Force, Trick Room, Imprison, and then a fourth attack. Maybe something like Hyper Voice, something like Mystical Fire, but with the Sandstorm up, I'm not even sure those will be able to pick up the knockout into Tyranitar. So yeah, this is the exact setup Miguel wanted to go for. You protect here, let the Whimsicott feign from sand, and then hope that the Indeedee doesn't have a way to really hit you. Of course, both players once again have access to each other's team sheets as well, so perhaps Miguel knows the opposing Indeedee just doesn't have anything to hit the Tyranitar right now.
Yeah, we are going to see an attempt come out from Giacomo, but with that protect on the board, that is going to protect Tyranitar from both of those attacks as Whimsicott does faint to that Sandstorm damage, and now it's up to whether or not Indeedee actually has an attack to deal with this Tyranitar before it gets knocked out.
Yeah, it was Expanding Force coming out last turn from the Indeedee, I believe, so it doesn't look like the Indeedee actually is a way to deal with Tyranitar, and Tyranitar will be able to seal up this game. I thought really good adjustment to bring here because of how well it matched up against everything. The one thing I had to worry about was the Cinderace. So Cinderace changing into a Steel type was really smart, right? Because if it didn't, then it would have fainted from, you know, a Sandstorm that turn, so allowed it to survive for a little bit longer. But I think, you know, Miguel making the correct protect plays, basically protecting Tyranitar at the right time, right when Iron Head was going.